Hi everybody. Stretch out a little bit. We're doing good. I'm going to review some of the new things. I'm going to take you fast forward into what's happening on a global level. And don't worry about missing it too much, because I'll give the PowerPoint to Dan and you can send it out to everybody. There's a lot of important information coming up that's going to have an effect on our national security, both in the domestic arena here at home and in the international arena. And of course, everything's interactive, so that nothing is isolated. It's all tangled together in a big ball of string. So as soon as the PowerPoint comes up, it's called Eliminating the Gray. The reason why I'm using that title is that's a jihadi term. What they're seeking to do globally is eliminate the gray areas. And so how are they going to eliminate the gray area? They're going to push their ideology into regions where it's never been, kind of like water under pressure. You know, you think of a sponge floating on water. What's the natural thing that the water is going to do with the sponge? Soak into it, right? Saturate it. If you're not happy with the rate of absorption of the water, what are you going to do? You're going to push on it from above, and that's terrorism. But the strategy is the same. The goal is the same, to saturate that sponge. So the bottom line question is, how do you insulate, how do you waterproof the sponge from being saturated, with the caveat that you can't take the sponge out of the water? And of course, we're the sponge. How do you waterproof the sponge? It's called the Constitution. It's the best waterproofing there is, because it's a document that describes our sovereignty. That's what the Constitution is really all about, is a description of the sovereignty that was endowed to us by our Creator. The unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are our endowed sovereignty. And both the green and the red, who are seeking to undermine that, are trying to replace the sovereignty with their own idea of what a government should be. Not of, for, and by the people, but by a small group who dictate to the rest of us how we should live. This is
where you're supposed to be. Because they keep playing up behind you.
This is it.
Okay.
This is the title, Eliminating the Gray. And why I put that slide right there is that's Hamas. Very pleasant looking fellows, if you didn't know they were Hamas, correct?
Right.
And where do you suppose they are? There's a clue to where they are in the picture in the background. They're in Iran. Our supposed friends who are going to restrain themselves from developing a nuclear bomb, right? Because we asked them to and we paid them not to do it, right? Iran is hosting Hamas, but not just Iran, so are other Sunni countries around the world. And this, my friends, is the face of evil in a suit and tie. And it's eliminating the gray. Again, that's a jihadi term, and that's what they intend to do around the world, is push their influence like water under pressure, like saturation of the sponge. And the best way that we can prevent that saturation is to recognize that it's our sovereignty that's under assault. Sovereignty is supreme power or authority, and the authority of a state to govern itself by or another state. We have been endowed with unalienable rights by our Creator, and the Creator instituted government among men to preserve the very liberties that He endowed us with. We're the only country in the world that specifically states that our rights come from the Creator above. Good. And that sovereignty, it's more fundamental than the Constitution, and it's way more fundamental than a wall built around the border of our city or of our country. Because if we have a 40-foot thick wall and we don't understand what our sovereignty is, we will still lose. Yeah. And the threat is not that some great shredder in the sky will devour the Constitution, or that it'll be erased off the blackboard when we wake up tomorrow morning. The threat is that not enough people in the country will recognize that the Constitution is worth defending. And when that critical mass comes, then we will fall. So that's the responsibility of everyone here, is to simply pass on to the next generations and everybody that you meet the simple act, the simple discipline of attaching everything that you do from now on, and I mean that literally, going forward, from today forward, attach whatever position you take to a constitutional principle. Be able to literally cite it for chapter and verse. Why is Sharia law illegal in the United States? All the debate we have about freedom of religion, freedom of expression, there's a fundamental clause in the Constitution that makes Sharia law completely illegal. Can somebody tell me the place in the Constitution where that is written?
It's separation of church and state.
No, that's First Amendment. First Amendment. What's the second word of First Amendment? Amendment. What's in an amendment to? What is the First Amendment amending? The fundamental Constitution. That means that it can never supersede the foundational clauses in the Constitution. And the fundamental clause in the Constitution that makes Sharia law illegal is Article 6. That the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and that the judges of each state will be bound thereby. A very simple provision. Are we seeing examples today of judges who are not being bound by the Constitution? We absolutely are. We are descending into chaos and anarchy when we have the answer to the problem standing literally right in front of us. But we have lost our grip, like losing your grip on the steering wheel of the Constitution that guides us down the road. And even if we build a wall all the way around the country and we don't recognize the nature of sovereignty and the Constitution, we will still fail. Because that sponge is going to get saturated if we don't wake up. However, if we do, and we can spray the waterproofing of the Constitution into the sponge, then no power can prevail against us, because when we recognize the sovereignty that the Creator endowed us with, we become immovable. And we also become capable of recognizing the true nature of threat. This is Abraham Lincoln, and he basically said that we must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country, the last best hope on earth. What are we enthralled by? What do we need to be disenthralled by? Why don't we all become partisans? And I don't mean political partisans like Democrats or Republicans. I'm talking about constitutional partisan. Is there any reason why anybody could fault us for becoming partisans of the Constitution? Do you know what a paladin is? Paladin, have gun, will travel. Let's become paladin. Paladin means a trusted military officer. Let's put that, instead of the gun in the holster, let's put the Constitution in our pocket and become paladins of the Constitution. Partisans. All of us can be. That means everybody here in this room has a responsibility and a role that they can play. We must graduate from the thought that there's nothing that we can do. There's plenty that each one of you can do. Each one of us can do. From this day forward, the 23rd of October 2017, somewhere in the region of Cleveland, Ohio, I'm giving you a challenge. I'd like to come back here in a year and ask 5 or 10 or 20 of you. I won't even talk. I'll let you tell me the stories of what you did in the last year to apprehend what we were apprehended for and get a grip on that steering wheel, the Constitution, and begin to regain the territory that we have ceded to our adversaries. Does that sound like a good proposal? This is one of our adversaries, and we're flying. By the way, what time is it right now, literally on the clock?
8:35.
So we're starting to go behind, so I'm not going to go too fast, but is that an ominous looking symbol or not? And down here on the bottom, those yellow words in Arabic is wa'uda. It means prepare to terrify your enemies and slaughter them. This is the symbol of the Muslim Brotherhood, the so-called moderate organization that my former chief executive, Obama, made a formal political alliance with and would have put me in jail for simply doing the job that I stood up and took the oath for, which was to target those individuals and keep them from ever having any influence in either the social or the political or the law enforcement arena of our country. That's what I got in trouble for. Those people, right there. Why do you suppose they have two swords? Enforcement of Sharia law internally and promotion of Sharia law externally by the sword. Do you see an olive branch there? No. Do you see any exclusion zones there? When North America comes around, are we excluded from the influence? The malevolent gravitational force of the power of this symbol?
So-called
No.
peace book of the Quran.
And that, by the way, is the Quran. And how do you know that? How can you, what is a plausible reason of identifying that book as the Quran? Yeah, it reads from right to left. So nothing in this symbol is accidental. And this is a picture of, that word in Arabic is Hamas. That's in the West Bank. And I like this picture because that mystery of that, who is that person behind the black veil? She looks like a black hole in space, doesn't she? We don't know who she is. And that is basically the symbol, the camouflage, the subtlety of the nature of the threat we face. Standing right in front of us, but there's no way that we can identify it except for the giveaway clue of the word Hamas right behind her. Now, this is CARE. Jim talked about this already. There's no reason on God's green earth that this organization should be allowed to parade itself through the capitals of states and the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., when we've already known for 10 years that they are irrevocably and irrefutably tied to support of Hamas. There's no debate about it. So why are they being allowed to parade themselves and strut around like barnyard roosters in the capitals of our states and country as though they have preeminent authority? It's because it was given to them by the previous administration, openly and blatantly. And now they're rubbing our faces in it. It's called supremacy. It's like the bully on the barnyard, in the schoolyard. I lost my clickability. I've been paralyzed.
But it doesn't make noise.
There we go. I'd like to give you some homework assignments. Again, don't be nervous about missing it. You can get the PowerPoint. And all the URLs are down in the notes sections of each slide. I wrote this on the January 22nd, is it 2nd or 3rd, of this year, 2 days after President Trump was inaugurated, and it is a 14-paragraph walkthrough of a fatwa that the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America issued calling the election of Donald Trump a calamity, which in Arabic to English means a very, very serious offense. And they wrote in very plain English exactly what their strategic and tactical goal is vis-a-vis the election of Trump. And we're seeing it unfold day by day right in front of us. The Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America doesn't sound too terrible in English. But in Arabic, it's Majama Fuqaha al-Sharia bi-Amrikia. You heard the last two words, didn't you? Al-Sharia bi-Amrikia. They're openly promoting Sharia law right here in the United States in direct violation of Article 6 of the Constitution. This, my friends, is the most dangerous Muslim Brotherhood organization in the entire country. And most of us have never heard of it. Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America. Go ahead and look it up and read through it. It's not light reading, because I pulled 32 verses from the Quran out of the English, camouflaged, if you will, and laid it out step by step. And this is Linda Sarsour. She gave a speech at the ISNA this year, and I did the same thing with her. I listened to her speech 50 times. And because I did not want to be accused of misquoting anything that she said, so I made double darn sure that everything that I wrote about her was an absolute verbatim quotation from her, and walked through all of her speech and pulled the Quranic and the Hadith and all of the other Islamic sources and attached them to her speech to the ISNA. This is the one where she called for jihad against President Trump. And that really wasn't even actually the worst thing that she said. This is all new stuff, well past when I published the book. This is all within months old. So this is what's happening. The forces of gravity that are affecting the solar system that we live in, I'm showing them to you now. And these are all attacks on our sovereignty, plain and simple. This is Linda Sarsour. With the guy in the middle is Jihad Awad. He's the president of CARE. He's a known Hamas operative. We've known him for 25 years. And he's still walking around in broad daylight. And the guy on the right is Yasser Qadi, and he's the one that's connected to the San Bernardino Mosque that I've talked about with Tablighi Jamaat. The other group that I worked on when I was a law enforcement officer, the two groups that got me in the most trouble, almost put me in jail, are standing right there with Linda Sarsour. The Orlando attack and Muslim Brotherhood, right there in real life. And this is only, what, June? A couple months ago. Here she is with the pending Democratic nominee for the governorship of Michigan. Right there, guys. Known affiliate of terrorism, hobnobbing with a possible candidate for governor of Michigan. This is where we've come to. This is the new generation, people, right here. And if we stand still because we're older and we don't think we have the energy, then kids like this are going to run right over the top of us. But what they lack, what we lack in youthful ability, they lack in wisdom. And which one do you think can prevail in the long run? Wisdom or strength?
Wisdom.
Wisdom always will prevail over strength. This is something I would like you to look up. See the title? Half of prominent jihadis tied to nonviolent Islamism, new study shows. Guess who the group that is the core of the uranium atom of this radicalization that they're referring to here? Would you like to venture a guess what group it is? Muslim Brotherhood, operating in the UK and globally, is behind all of the radicalization and moving forward into what is called Salafi Islam, which means original, not radical. Salafi doesn't mean radical, it means going back to the original form of Islam. Here is the study, Milestones to Militancy. It gives you a step-by-step process, and this is done, by the way, by, I can't read it even with my glasses on, Tony Blair's Institute. He's not known as a conservative. He's to the left. When it gets to the point that even left-leaning organizations have come to the inescapable conclusion that the radicalization process is not like getting hit by meteors out of space, just some random unfortunate thing, but is actually being driven by a gravitational force emanating out of the core of the Muslim Brotherhood structure, then you know that we have really come to a turning point in history. And that they themselves recognize this. Do you know what this word is? Anyone here? Jihad. That's how you say it in Arabic. And that's another study. Most UK jihadists tied to nonviolent. Why is this important? What was countering violent extremism all about? Countering violent extremism attempted to disconnect the ideology of Islam with terrorism. And that if we would do that, we would end the terrorist problem. When this tells you they came to the inescapable conclusion that it was exactly the opposite. That people are part of networks. Any of you that have heard me talk in the media will always hear me talk about individuals and organizations, right? This is a perfect proof of it. The individuals become part of a social network, and as they are drawn into the gravitational influence of that network, they become more and more like the founder of Islam himself, Muhammad. And what do I always say about the ants? Follow the trail, find the nest. This is a perfect proof of that. You know that I was an entomologist, right? My first career, I was a founding member of the Nerd Club. We patented the clipboard, the white lab coat, the pen holder, and the glasses. We got patents on all of them. Entomologists of the nerds of all nerds, simply because there's more detail, more fine points about the little insects and agriculture than any other group of living organisms. So if you're a good one, you have to be really pay close attention to detail, and you're a careful observer of behavior. Does that sound like counterterrorism? Yes. Attention to detail and close attention to behavior. Individuals, organizations, there's always a connection, and there will be, for example, with the Las Vegas shooting. Eventually we will find out that this individual was connected in some way to some kind of a network, because we're social creatures. We don't operate in vacuum. We can't. It's virtually impossible to do it. Plus, we don't want to. And with Islam, their worldview, it's anathema. It's completely terrifying to even consider being separated from the global community, which, by the way, is called Ummah in Arabic, which means mother. It's more terrifying for a Muslim to be separated from the community than it is for a little child to be separated from his mother. And so this concept of lone wolf and all this random acts of violence that we heard is a complete false narrative. And this study, thanks to them, proves the point. Here's the other one for Caliph and Country, exploring how British jihadis join a global movement. Global movement organization. Individuals, organizations. And all of this is designed to undermine the sovereignty of these countries around the world where these individuals are operating in many places, and many cases right out in the open, like here. So you can download these reports and read through them. Now this here is Obama's hidden Iran deal giveaway. What he did is he deleted the information that officers in that part of the government were doing, just like what I was doing in Customs and Border Protection with Tablighi Jamaat and the Muslim Brotherhood. In order to make the Iran deal go through, he simply eliminated all the derogatory information that these guys had worked on for their whole career in one fell swoop. It wasn't just me. It just so happened that I was one of the very first ones that saw it happen, simply because I was part of the agency that was created to defend our country from threat, both foreign and domestic, Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection. I was on the front of the front line. And so when the waves started hitting us, people like myself were the very first ones to get hit. And the U.S. government had to make a choice whether they were going to take this derogatory information and act on it from a law enforcement perspective, or whether they were going to eliminate it. So what did they choose to do? Eliminate it. But I can tell you there's a rosy side to the story. I'm like the Terminator. I have extensive files. I kept all of it. 42,000 files. It's a bad combination if you're a bad guy to put a nerd and a cop with a gun together. Because I use the qualities that I learned in my scientific training to go after terrorists. And I had a gift for it from the Lord above. And He enabled me to see into the future, if you will, and I became a harbinger. I talked about things 10 years ago that are happening now. And now I'm telling you in a declarative fashion, a fact-based statement. You can write it down or record me on your cell phone. If we don't remedy this, it's inevitable, like adding variables to a mathematical equation, that we're going to have more attacks in the future. And eventually the point is going to come when the American people are sick of hearing their elected officials say there was nothing that we could do and we didn't know. They do know. And I went to my 56th visit to Congress about 2 weeks ago and talked to Steve King from Iowa about the Tablighi Jamaat case, i.e. San Bernardino. And if he follows through, we're going to actually have what they call informal hearings on the Hill, and we're going to actually push this thing out into the open. 45 national security experts urge President Trump to withdraw from the deal with Iran. By favor, I am one of those that signed. This letter is going to be framed in the Hall of History. It will be. The letter of opposition to the Iran deal by 45 subject matter experts in national security. As you walk down the long hall of history into eternity, this letter will be framed somewhere on one of the wall, because this was a point in history. Now, why is all that important? Because remember I showed you already earlier the picture eliminating the gray? This is Hamas in Iran. How many days ago? Yesterday. This is real time, friends. These trees are bearing fruit, bitter fruit, that have been planted in the last few generations to the point now where you're starting to see bushels of apples or bitter fruit being gathered off of them. So Hamas is tying in with Iran. Basically what they did in simple terms is they went to Iran and said, here we are. We're on the front lines with your greatest enemy, Israel. Sign us up. We'll do whatever you ask us to do. Here's Tillerson signing an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the government of Qatar to help increase terrorism, fight against terrorism financing. The only problem with that is that he undercut the efforts of the neighboring states to push Qatar away from their affiliation with, you guessed it, the Muslim Brotherhood. And he did not consult with the other states. He went out and packed these guys on the back, signed a memorandum of understanding, and completely undercut the momentum that the other states had gained. He betrayed our own allies in the Middle East. How do you think they see us when we keep doing these kind of things over and over again? By the way, the propaganda that you saw about Qatar Airlines is in response to the effort of the other Gulf states to isolate them. They put an embargo on Qatar. So Qatar comes out with this nice British accent commercial about how wonderful it is to allow people to travel because they're being embargoed by their neighbors in the Gulf states because of their affiliation with the Muslim Brotherhood. That's what's really behind it. Now you see how ugly and cynical propaganda can actually be, don't you? All that pretty pictures of the nice places in the world and the airplane flying through the air, it's all deception. Here's a more recent thing. Tillerson rejected the Kurdistan independence referendum. Why do you suppose he did that? I'll give you a clue. There's only one other country on the face of the earth that openly endorsed the effort of the Kurds to gain autonomy. Would someone like to guess who that country was? That's right. You guys are good. So, since Israel openly declared its alliance with the Kurdish people, the rest of the countries in the Middle East certainly can't have that, so they put pressure on the U.S. State Department to denounce the best other ally that we have. We betrayed the entire Kurdish people. When all we talk about is democracy and freedom and independence, right? When they actually took the step forward, we betrayed them. Because our supposed friends and allies, like Iran and whoever else you want to name, didn't want Israel to have any more influence in that part of the world, so we sabotaged them for the sake of a false peace. And now Iran is invading Kurdistan from the east as we speak, and Iran is coming up from the south, and they're killing them now. The very people that helped us the most are being killed by Iraqis and Iranians right now.
Did he do that on his own?
Well, I don't know. I doubt it. I'm sure he has a lot of geniuses that advise him. But it's the same geniuses that have been advising in the Middle East for the last 2 or 3 generations that keep getting us further and further and further into trouble.
But why did Trump name?
Good question.
Trump does not have a background in any kind of ideology.
Yeah, I know he learns fast, but I can't explain some of the choices that he's made.
Condoleezza Rice recommended that Trump hire Tillerson.
Like I said, it's a nasty tangled ball of string. And now that you know this kind of information, real-time stuff, again, what are we talking about? What's the foundational bedrock? Constitution. One level underneath that, sovereignty. We deny the Kurdish people the right of sovereignty because of the influence and the opinions of other countries that we're supposedly allied with. We sacrifice their effort to secure some sort of false peace, which will come back and bite us.
But why isn't Israel involved in?
Well, what can Israel say?
I would think it's...
They already made their declaration that they supported them. They can't contradict the United States and Tillerson. They can't stop him. There's probably back channels ways that they can help, but in the macro political arena like this, Tillerson did the same thing to Israel vis-a-vis Kurdistan that he did to the rest of the Gulf states vis-a-vis Qatar with that MOU. He signed away their ability to influence their neighbor. And this is Al-Qaeda, by the way. Did you know that it's actually the original Al-Qaeda is 5 different individuals and 12 different affiliated organizations, which over time gained other members? Those ones right there. That's the first Al-Qaeda, which was, as we think of, was Osama bin Laden. 5 people, 12 organizations. Then comes the next one. This is ISIS. ISIS is 10 times bigger than the original Al-Qaeda. It's got 35 different affiliates around the country. Around the world. And it's popping up like mushrooms in different countries, as again, daily as we speak. But there's a third group, and this is the most important thing I want to tell you tonight, perhaps. There's an Al-Qaeda 3. It's called Al-Qaeda of the Indian subcontinent. It coalesced in 2014, but you haven't heard much about it until quite recently. Al-Qaeda of the Indian subcontinent merges together all of the Jihad parties from Afghanistan, which borders on Iran, by the way, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. Have we been hearing a little bit about Myanmar lately and Rohingyas? Rohingyas are Muslims who are seeking to subvert the government of Myanmar, just like they do in so many other places in the world. And those individuals in the Indian subcontinent extend their influence all the way to the Uyghurs in Western China. You've heard of the Uyghurs, right? So you're talking somewhere between a third to half of the entire population of the world has now coalesced into one super organization called AQIS. Now, do you think that they knew that when they announced the new old Afghanistan policy, which is to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table? Do you really believe that the Taliban are going to come to the negotiating table when they just formed an alliance with about 250 different Salafi jihadi groups all the way from Afghanistan clear to Myanmar? Not likely.
I heard they're killing the Buddhists over there too.
Well, they haven't for 5
Whoever
years.
stands in their way is a target.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you just fill in the blank wherever they are. And that word in Arabic is fitna. Fitna. When I do this, if I put my hand out in front of you and I keep you from advancing any further, in other words, if I exercise my sovereignty and I want to control my border, I am causing what is known in the Islamic world as fitna, oppression. And that is a catalyst. Whenever you put your hand out in front of the global Islamic movement, it catalyzes a response based in the Quran of 2 verbs, qatl and kharaj. Qatl means to slaughter and kharaj means to push away. They occur 4 times more frequently in the Quran than the verb jihad, which occurs about 40 times. Qatl and kharaj occur about 180 times, and their dimensions more violent than anything you ever imagine about jihad. And that is catalyzed by opposition. That's why you see indiscriminate slaughter whenever Muslim groups advance into new territories, because the people had the audacity to stand up for their own sovereignty. Therefore, they're going to be vindictively killed and have their faces literally rubbed into the ground in order to subdue them so that they will never rise up against the authority of Sharia law. That's the way it works. And if it's Hindus or if it's any other group, the strategy and tactics haven't changed in 1,400 years. And now we come to the heart of the matter. Just in case you weren't really sure what AQIS was really intending to accomplish, they were kind enough to publish in pretty well written English their manifesto. It's 20 pages long, and it tells you exactly what they intend to accomplish as a new global level Al-Qaeda. And the first 2 items on the list are to target Americans and Israelis globally, and then to subvert the countries that I mentioned to you already and expand the caliphate to a global level. They are very plain about what they intend to do, and they provide all of the Quranic foundational ideological references right in this 20-page document called the Code of Conduct. We have come to a new era, friends. Whatever you knew before is going to be obsolete. Looking forward, you can expect an entire new game, an entire new nature of the threat that we're facing, and we're walking right into it if we don't take this to heart. Osama bin Laden did the same thing in 1998. He declared global jihad on the Americans and the Zionists. He warned us what he intended to do 3 years before 9/11 happened. Why am I telling you this? Is this scary? Okay, but would you rather know it or not know it?
Know it.
Okay, now that you know it, what defense, what foundation, what personal ideological foundation are you going to stand on in order to not be overwhelmed or paralyzed by fear or anger? The Constitution. Now we're coming full circle to what I started with. Sovereignty. The right for us to stand up for the liberties that we were endowed by our Creator, who was kind enough to give men the gift to be able to put it into words in a document called the Constitution, which is simply a discussion of the sovereign rights that the Lord endowed us with. And now we have come to the challenge of our time. It's not about jihad, it's not about terrorism, it's not really about Antifa, it's not really about the progressive left or any of the rest of it per se, because those are all tactics. What is the strategy? To undermine our sovereignty, to replace, to alter or abolish, as the Declaration says, the current form of government and replace it with one which they consider to be more suitable. To alter or abolish. You can take the words right out of the Declaration of Independence. It tells you. So, any questions? Oh, yeah. I have my books here. So, they're over there. I think, are we going to have questions and answers or no?
I'm not as young as you are, so I can't move as good. Okay, we're going to do Q&A like normal. We'll line up over here. Bev will have the mic, and Jim and Philip will take your questions. They'll be together up here. Okay. If you want to line up and buy books and not